Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin in Ottawa, where the day after U.S. President Donald Trump's Liberation Day presentation of new tariffs, Prime Minister Mark Carney has paused his campaign. Carney held a press conference that was heavy on tariffs and the economy, and he warned Canadians that economic times will be tough and that the Canadian economy will have to fundamentally change. That Canada needs to go its own way because the United States is no longer a reliable trade partner.
We will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations. Breaking down internal trade barriers so that we can have one Canadian economy, not 13. Making Canada more productive and competitive. Building things in this country again. Millions more homes. Building clean and conventional energy. Building more public transport, more mines, more assembly lines.
To Regina now, where a meeting at the Saskatchewan legislature got heated when questions about the cost of living in northern communities was raised by an opposition MLA. It happened during the estimates meeting, which is a process where the government addresses unanticipated expenses from their budget and seeks approval to pay for them.
On the news release that came from the First Nations and Métis Funding Budget 2025-2026 document that was put out by your ministry, in there it has budget line items that have been put out from your ministry that talks about the different specific to First Nations and Métis, which you're the minister of. And so the $2.1 million that your ministry had put in the budget is not something that I am able to question. Where that revenue or where that money will be spent?
That's simply it's a budget question. We're dealing with the estimates that are in front of us here. So let's stick to that questioning. Minister Schmaltz.
Also, just to clarify, that news release is based on a government release as a whole. It's not entirely specific to any one ministry.
Now, that was Jordan McPhail, the NDP Shadow Minister for Northern Affairs, trying to put questions about affordability, healthcare and highways to Saskatchewan Indigenous Affairs Minister Eric Schmaltz. McPhail called the way he was treated in the meeting, quote, shameful and very troubling. A new HIV prevention drug is now covered under the non-insured health benefits program for First Nations and Inuit. The injectable drug called APTN will reduce the risk of contracting the human immune deficiency virus, or HIV, through sex. APTN Sav Jonesa finds out how this health coverage might help Indigenous peoples who are disproportionately affected by HIV in Canada.
A new injectable medication for HIV prevention is now covered for First Nations and Inuit under the Non-Insured Health Benefits Program, or NIHB. APTN is a bi-monthly injectable that's more than 99% effective at reducing the risk of HIV transmission through sex. Certified registered nurse and Two-Spirit Health Director Jessie Dame says APTN is very exciting when it comes to combating HIV in Canada.
It's an injectable, so folks can get as minimal as 6 injections a year, which is extremely decreases barriers to pill access and to continuously having to go to pharmacies.
The human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, weakens the immune system against disease and illness and can lead to AIDS if left untreated. HIV is primarily transmitted through sex without condoms and shared injection drug needles. HIV can be acquired no matter your sexuality, gender, or race, but some communities are more impacted than others. The Public Health Agency of Canada estimated more than 62,000 people in Canada were living with HIV at the end of 2020. In that same report, they found Indigenous people made up approximately 10% of all people living with HIV in the country, though Indigenous people make up about 5% of Canada's population.
Indigenous people continue to represent the highest, or some of the highest numbers around HIV transmission within the country, and especially when we look at Two-Spirit, queer, and trans Indigenous folks. I think it's really important when we talk about HIV to really make sure we talk about the context. So unfortunately, Indigenous people are disproportionately affected by HIV, but that's due to racism and homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. So really putting the blame on the systematic structures that lead to the increase in HIV.
HIV prevention medication is also called pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP for short. Oral PrEP pills were already covered under NIHB before the Apretude injectable became available, but are less effective and require daily dosing or on-demand use. Dame says spreading more awareness and promoting education around PrEP and HIV is necessary for seeing lower transmission rates.
More conversations or kitchen table conversations is important. So we need to look at structures that support family members to get access to knowledge, to bring it home to community and share in community spaces. So we are currently investigating what Indigenous knowledge mobilization looks like and working with community to find and develop new tools.
You can find more information on the Apretude injectable at apretude.com or visit can.ca for resources on HIV within Indigenous communities. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Laxqualams Band on the north coast of British Columbia, near Prince Rupert, is one step closer to self-government. The band will hold a referendum on April 9th to vote on a proposed constitution that asserts membership's rights. It says the document will help strengthen local governance and provide a framework for resolving disputes, among many other things. At least 60% of membership needs to vote in favor of the new constitution for it to move forward. If that happens, the constitution will come into effect on September 13th. It's been 8 years since Happy Charles went missing from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Our VJ Rachel May is looking at what the family is doing to get police to keep looking. As we head to break, here's a look.
I'm Rachel May in Saskatoon. 42-year-old Happy Charles went missing on April 3rd, 2017. She was last seen on security camera footage at midnight on the campus of Prince Albert Collegiate Institute. To mark the 8th anniversary of her disappearance, her family has organized a public demonstration in the city of Prince Albert for later this week, calling on the local police to keep searching for Charles. Watch for the full story soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back. Mark Carney's father's time as a principal of a federal Indian day school in the Northwest Territories has made some headlines this week, including a story currently on our website, aptnnews.ca, and a column by one of our panelists, Niigaan Sinclair. For more, Niigaan is joining us, and so is Sheila North, back to help us out again this week on the Truth in Politics panel. Sheila, Niigaan, thanks for being with us. Niigaan, we'll start with you as we, of course, wanted to talk about your column this past week about Mark Carney's father, who is believed to have run a federal Indian day school and who also defended his problematic legacy with Canada's systemic mistreatment of Indigenous peoples. Can you tell us a bit about what you found out while working on that column?
Yeah, so a lot of misinformation is out there. So I'm glad that we get a chance to sort of correct the record, not talk about, simply taking Robert Carney's legacy, Mark Carney's father, and then placing it on Canada's new Prime Minister, because he said things that are quite different to his father. But simply put, Robert Carney, for a brief period, was a principal of a day school. He was the principal of his day school in Northwest Territories. It was a school that included both a high school and an elementary school. And then for a period of time very short amount of time, ran schools as a superintendent kind of model, overseeing the schools in the Northwest Territories. So naturally would have seen, and therefore the residential school system as we would now know it, of course, a system that highly problematic and of course very violent for many of those who experienced those schools directly. And then later, as a historian at the University of Alberta, he did things like run for office, lost in Edmonton, and then later defended his legacy as a participant within the residential school system. Wrote many essays talking about the more or less complaining about the ways in which others, like the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, personified residential schools. He said things like, why aren't we talking about the good stories? Why do we have to keep focusing on trauma? Really things that we now know of as highly problematic. And we would often call those kinds of individuals residential school denialists, not that they are denying the schools or that even that atrocities happen at the schools, but then wanted to sort of obscure the legacy of the schools by talking about a few good experiences, or maybe somebody learned a skill or had a good day here and there. The fact is that residential schools, nothing about that policy was beneficial. It never should have happened. And so Robert Carney, I think, is on the wrong side of history. And one thing I also discovered is that Mark Carney is not his father. So he has said a lot of things that are certainly contrarian to his father. He says things like Canada's economy should be run by Indigenous knowledge and values, which anyone who believes in residential schools would never say. So clearly Mark Carney, I think, has to be accountable for things that his father said. But at the same time, I think he's broken away from that legacy and is on the way to do so more.
Sheila, your thoughts on this and whether it should have an impact on Mark Carney's run here?
No, I think I appreciate Niigaan's perspectives and laying it out there. I do understand why people would be concerned and make those associations. And for that, I think that Mark Carney at some point needs to come out and straighten that out on what he thinks and how differently he might think, because it is an issue that we all have come to see more of how people think about what happened during these times. Sure, there might have been good outcomes here and there, but the assimilation and the atrocities that happened during those times outweigh all of those, and we can't deny that. And I think that at some point he does have to come out and clarify his thoughts on it, even more so.
Niigaan, more to come on that on our website later today. Niigaan, we had NDP leader Jagmeet Singh join us in studio yesterday, and I'll just mention that we did try to get Mark Carney in studio while he was here as well, but they said they didn't have time. We asked Mr. Singh about a couple of ridings held by Indigenous MPs or important to Indigenous peoples in those ridings that might be up for grabs. Do you think that the NDP is at risk of losing seats like Nikki Ashton's, Leah Gazan's, Lori Idlut's?
The NDP is fighting for its life, period. If Winnipeg Centre, which is Leah Gazan's riding, is under threat, and I don't polls are not suggesting that that riding is under threat, but certainly that there is, for the most part, a paper candidate being run by the Liberals, someone who has almost no experience, is a youth from the youth Liberal wing of the party. They did not put up somebody who they expected to do well in that riding. But if that that person is polling okay, meaning not way off in the distance, but actually close to Leah Gazan, a staunch NDP riding, you know that everywhere else the NDP is in trouble. Nikki Ashton's certainly in trouble in the north. Very strong candidate, and Rebecca Chartrand, who has infrastructure from the last time that she ran in the north. Undoubtedly, that will be a race to watch. And then also, there is kind of a split vote that looks like in the riding of Elmwood-Transcona. We've got while the NDP did pull that out in a by-election about 6 months ago, they're looking like, because of the changing of boundaries, because of the resurgence of the Liberals in that area, that the NDP are in trouble. So basically, what we have is Manitoba's the lifeboat of the NDP. If there is no support, or if there's a lack of support, or people decide that they're going to turn to the Liberals instead of the NDP, you're going to see the NDP perhaps lose party status in this election, which is a whole uphill battle, a hole that's going to be very difficult to get out of.
Yeah, Sheila, some polling does have the NDP losing official party status. Do you think that that's possible?
It's entirely possible at this point, I think, although, it has a lot more to do with all of the country, all of Canada. I think we're seeing a different race this time from 2015, when Justin Trudeau was getting into power and his government, and we were just all coming from a conservative government, and many Indigenous people were getting involved because of the concerns that they had with the attack on Indigenous, sovereignty and treaty rights and all of that. And so it's a different kind of feel right now. I'm not sure if the Indigenous people are as engaged at this point. It doesn't seem like it. None of the parties have made it a priority of any of our issues at this point, except, it might not seem like it, but inadvertently they are, because they keep talking about natural resources, and they keep talking about Canada as a sovereign nation. And many people that are staunch and protectors of treaties will say that Canada is not a nation, so therefore it can't be a sovereign nation, sovereign country maybe, but difference in nation and country. I think that is a different election, is going to be interesting how it plays out. And I think we need to see more participation from the Indigenous leadership to pivot. Like, everyone is pivoting to make themselves relevant to the topics of the day. And I think Indigenous people and leadership also need to do that and start sending messages that are relevant to the topics, and that includes the effect of Trump in the United States to this election.
Sheila, Niigaan, we'll have to leave it there. Sheila, thanks for helping out again this week. We'll continue the conversation over on the podcast. Thanks to you both.
I can say thank you.
Time for one last break, and then we'll bring you a preview of tonight's Nation to Nation and a look at this week's all-new episode of APTN Investigates. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Our friend Clarence Jones from the Gitxsan Nation shared this photo of what he says is the 100-year-old Salvation Army Church located in Sikidak. Thanks, Clarence. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 11 in Fredericton, 12 with showers in Halifax. Minus 14 in Kuujjuaq, 11 below in Nain. Plus 11 in Montreal, 6 in Val-d'Or, 7 in Sault Ste. Marie and North Bay, 10 in Ottawa. 7 in Thunder Bay, plus 2 with flurries in Sioux Lookout. Minus 2 in snow in God's Lake and Norway House. Plus 3 in Winnipeg, minus 3 in Dauphin. Minus 2 in Regina, sunny and minus 1 in North Battleford. Plus 4 under sunny skies in Meadow Lake, minus 1 in La Ronge. Plenty of sun across northern Alberta, 8 for High Level and Fort McMurray. Plus 5 in Edmonton, sunny and 6 in Lethbridge. 15 for Vancouver and Kamloops. 12 in Prince George, 13 in Smithers. 0 with snow in Old Crow, plus 6 in Whitehorse. Minus 3 in Yellowknife, cloudy and plus 1 in Norman Wells. Minus 18 in Sax Harbor, 14 below in Pawlatuck. Minus 13 with snow in Chesterfield and Baker Lake. Minus 23 in Resolute, 20 below in Igloolik. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a look at tonight's Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the news, it's week 2 of the federal election campaign, and the Chiefs of Ontario have released their election priorities document. Regional Chief Abram Benedict is here to tell us what it means. Métis National Council President Victoria Pruden is also here to talk about some of the issues her organization would like to see addressed in the campaign. And we talked to APTN Investigates reporter Tom Fenario about a piece he recently did on the underfunding of Indigenous police forces. All this ahead in just a few minutes on Nation to Nation.
Thanks, Fraser. Well, for more than 2 decades, Indigenous people standing up for their rights have faced the full weight of the state's power. From frontline clashes with specialized RCMP units to being watched by Canada's intelligence agency, government actions have been coming under renewed scrutiny. And coming up tomorrow night on the conclusion to their special 3-part series, Inside Policing, APTN Investigates asks, who's watching the watchers? Here's a preview.
I've been reporting for more than 2 decades. In that time, Indigenous people standing up for their rights have continually faced the full weight of the state's power.
Don't point your gun at me! Take your gun off of me!
From frontline clashes with specialized RCMP units to being spied on by Canada's intelligence agency, and more recently, clashes with private security staffed by ex-cops and ex-military. But first, I head into the mountains, driving to Blue River, a tiny town 2.5 hours outside of Kamloops.
Morning, how you doing?
Mayuk, along with her partner Aisha Jules, have returned to what's called the Tiny House Warriors encampment, set up right beside what was the TMX pipeline workers camp. The camp's empty now, the workers gone. They recall its construction.
There was no selective logging. The whole forest floor had wild blueberries, and those are Secwepemc women's medicine.
They did not go cheap on this at all. They got it done fast, and they hired the people to do it.
You know, you want to deal with title and rights in this country, you're going to meet with the RCMP, not with the politician. And I met with a lot of RCMPs, even just at this gate, over our title and rights. Go check it out. Go check it out.
And you can catch APTN Investigates Inside Policing Watching the Watchers, airing this Saturday on APTN. And we'll speak with Rob Smith right here tomorrow night. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. You can find much more, including that story on Mark Carney's father, over on our website, aptnnews.ca. And don't forget to join Creason at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Thanks for being with us. Stick around. Fraser's up next with Nation to Nation. We will see you back here tomorrow.